Many Muslims believe that Jesus will return to the Holy Land near the end of time to fulfill his divinely appointed mission. According to authentic Islamic traditions, he will defeat the Dajjal, the false Messiah, establish justice, and usher in a period of peace before the Day of Judgment. Within one contemporary Islamic interpretive framework, Jesus' return is understood not merely as a universal event, but as one deeply connected with the descendants of the biblical Israelites who remain in the Holy Land and ultimately submit to God. This interpretation draws upon several Quranic passages. Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 105 declares, "Indeed, we have written in the Psalms after the reminder, Torah, that my righteous servants shall inherit the land." Proponents interpret this verse as referring to the Holy Land. They argue that because the promise is said to have been written in the Psalms, Zabur, a scripture associated with the biblical Israelites, it points to the descendants of Jacob. Within this interpretive framework, the verse is understood as promising that the righteous among the descendants of Jacob, having submitted to God in true faith, will ultimately inherit the Holy Land. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 133, recalls Jacob's final words to his sons, asking whom they would worship after him. They replied that they would worship the God of Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, and Jacob, declaring, "We are Muslims, those who submit to him." This passage is understood to show that, from a Quranic perspective, Jacob anticipated that his descendants would continue in Islam, understood in its Quranic sense as complete submission to the one God, and therefore asked them to reaffirm their commitment to that faith before his death. Surah Al-Isra, verse 104, states that the children of Israel would dwell in the land and later be gathered again. "Afterward, we said to the children of Israel, 'Dwell securely in the land. Then, when the final promise comes to pass, we will bring you together.'" Within this interpretive framework, the gathering is understood as part of God's end-time plan associated with the return of Jesus. Surah Al-Imran, verse 49, identifies Jesus as a messenger specifically sent to the children of Israel. Accordingly, proponents argue that his second coming also has a special relationship to the descendants of the biblical Israelites living in and connected to the Holy Land. Some advocates of this interpretation further argue that many Palestinian Muslims preserve substantial ancestry from the ancient inhabitants of Judea, including descendants of the tribe of Judah who embraced Christianity and later Islam over the centuries. In this view, they represent a continuing remnant of the biblical Israelites residing in the Holy Land. Some proponents additionally identify certain Pathan, Pashtun communities in Afghanistan and Pakistan with descendants of the so-called Lost 10 Tribes of Israel. According to this interpretation, these descendants will be reunited with their Israelite brethren in the Holy Land during the events surrounding the return of Jesus. This identification, however, remains speculative and is not established by mainstream scholarship. From this perspective, the end-time narrative centers not on ethnic privilege, but on the restoration of true monotheism. The Holy Land becomes the stage where the righteous descendants of Israel, having embraced Islam, are joined by Jesus, who completes his mission among the children of Israel and establishes justice before the Day of Judgment. A parallel with dispensationalism. Proponents of this interpretation observe an interesting parallel with Christian dispensationalism. Dispensationalism expects God to fulfill his end-time purposes through the restoration of Israel and the return of Jesus to the Holy Land. Likewise, this Islamic interpretive model sees the Holy Land, the descendants of the biblical Israelites, and the return of Jesus as central to the unfolding of the last days. The principal difference lies in the identity of those Israelites. Whereas dispensationalism generally identifies them with the modern Jewish people and the State of Israel, this Islamic interpretive framework proposes that the covenantal remnant consists of Israelites who ultimately submit to God in Islam, including those whom it identifies as descendants preserved among Palestinian Muslims, with additional Israelite descendants among certain Pathan communities. Thus, while the theological conclusions differ, both eschatological frameworks assign a central role to the Holy Land, the descendants of Israel, and the return of Jesus in God's final redemptive plan. Could Palestinians be descendants of biblical Jews? What happened to the people of Judea after the Roman period? Historian Shlomo Sand offers a different answer to that question in his book, The Invention of the Jewish People. The familiar story says that the modern Jewish people are the direct descendants of those exiled from the Holy Land by the Romans, who then preserved their identity in a single unbroken line for nearly 2,000 years. Sand challenges that story. He argues that it is not supported by strong historical evidence. According to Sand, the Roman authorities did not carry out a full-scale deportation of the entire population of the Holy Land. The region, he says, remained inhabited, and many of its people likely stayed in place. From that point of view, Sand suggests another possibility. Some of the people who continued to live in the land over many centuries may have been descended from ancient Jews and Judeans. Over time, he argues, those populations changed their religion and identity. During the Byzantine period, many may have converted to Christianity. Later, with the rise of Islam, some may have become Muslims. Their descendants, Sand implies, could include today's Palestinians.